waiting for people to join. Oh, here.
Tip it a little bit.
Slightly to the. There you go. Sort of. Okay. Now it works. Hey, James. How's everything in New York, James? What's the latest on the right to record? I know you've been active out there, James. Tell me, quick, while people join. Hi, Dave.
Let me get my glasses.
Dave, where are you?
Comments.
Where do you live, Dave? Joshua Janoff. That's our guy from Long Island, right? Yeah, friends with Roman. So you know Roman and Frank. Oh, Ohio. No kidding. They got a shared parenting bill moving through Ohio, don't they, Dave? Yeah. Yeah, I met Roman Brick last week, and I gave a link to some of the bill died in Ohio. So by the way, I'm with Ryan Taylor.
Ryan Scott.
He goes by Ryan Scott, whatever. And Ryan and I have known each other for what, since 2019?
Yeah,
about 3 years.
Yeah.
About 3 years we've known each other. And so I got to know Ryan. You know, Ryan has a nice loud mouth, and when I was getting involved in this stuff,
A little bit of it rubbed off on Ted.
yeah, it was always there. But Ryan has a big mouth, and we need people with big mouths. So I got to know Ryan, and actually I represented him in this case. And Ryan, we did a 9-day hearing.
Yeah. It was like 70-something hours.
It was insane.
Well, and when we say 9 days, it wasn't 9 days consecutively. It was 9 days over the course of something like 6 months or 4 months.
It was
whatever.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was outrageous.
So Ryan, if you don't mind, Ryan, I'll tell your story just
go ahead.
a little bit. So Ryan was never married to a woman by the name of Sandra, and they had a child together. Which is now 40% of the population is unwed children. So I mean, it's almost approaching a majority. So Ryan wanted to have time with his son, and he didn't even meet his son for the first 2 years of his life.
And that's not to say that I wasn't trying either. I was in court the entire time. I don't know if that question is to me. When was my motion filed? Second Department. Oh no, that's.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I was actively trying to be involved in his life from day one. I actually filed my initial petition to the court a month after my son was born. So since a month after his birth until 2 years after the fact, being in court every 30 days, I still had no contact with my son.
Yeah, so we had a gatekeeping woman, controlling narcissistic woman from the beginning,
and the court's enabling it.
And the court enabled it. And so the first time Ryan ever got time with his son at all was supervised visitation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we have a constitution that says that parents are presumed fit. How could and of course he had no drug convictions, no DUIs, nothing like that, no criminal history.
No violent crimes.
No violent crimes, maybe a little something here and there.
There wasn't even an allegation.
Nobody's perfect, right? So, yeah, there was no motion to restrict his rights as a father ever. And the first time he sees his son, is under supervised visitation. So, obviously, he couldn't have done anything to his son because he's never even met him.
Yeah, right.
Okay? And there's that famous case I keep talking about from 1971 72 called Stanley versus Illinois, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, in which under Illinois law 50 years ago, if you're married to a woman, unmarried, cohabitating with a woman who just happens to be the mother of your children, and you're the father, and you live with your children, and if the mother became incapacitated or died, your children would go up to adoption without a hearing, meaning you would lose custody of your children, and your children would go to foster care without there even being a hearing. And, you know, when you see Ryan's story, which is becoming more and more and more common, okay, are you telling me that much has changed in 50 years?
No.
That the bias against unmarried fathers has changed in any marketable way at all? You know, so Ryan didn't do anything, and Ryan, just similar to me, lost his time without there being a hearing. That was August 10th of 2016.
Well,
right?
that was way after the fact.
No, 2018.
Yeah, it was 2018. If you go way back, this case started in 2014. If you go way back, you know, when I petitioned, and of course I'm the petitioner, I was the one that took her to court, and no allegation of abuse, and all she had to do was go into court and say, well, I think he's crazy. I think he's a danger. I think he's a risk, and they just bought it. They just did anything they wanted. Of course, at that time I was very ignorant to the law, had no knowledge of how procedures work and how courts and all that work, and so they take advantage of that. And what they do is then that judge, enabling her chaos, sends me to parenting classes, anger management classes. We did 3 or 4 mediation sessions. We did so what they do is then they source you out. They get you in there. They get you in their grip, and then they source you out to all their cottage industry, you know, people, and they make money off of all of that stuff. You know, we had to pay for the parenting classes and the mediators and all this bullshit.
Cash for kids. You had your son seized from you.
Yeah, all the while
Seized from you. It was a seizure. It was a seizure.
Yeah.
You had your son seized from you.
Right.
Effectively, and then you had to pay to get him back.
Right. Well, and then after that, it turns into what? It's now several years later. Still no relationship with my son. I'm having to go through, and as they do, they do this intentionally. They create the conflict, and they support and enable the conflict from the parent that is perpetuating the conflict, because then what they're doing is now the conflict is slowly over the course of months and years increasing, and as it increases, they start layering on other cottage industry. So now you've got counselors, now you've got GALs, and now you've got other attorneys, and now, I mean, what was it? At one point, we had like 6 attorneys in the same room. You know, what was that? The TRO that happened.
Oh
For
yeah.
them to get me to shut
Former
up.
attorneys, current attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
it's
tried to get a
nonsense.
temporary restraining order against Ryan from talking about them on Facebook.
Yeah, and so they had-
And the law firms filed into the parentage case.
yeah,
The law firms, who aren't even parties, filed into the parentage case to literally piggyback off this dumb woman in order to
yeah,
enjoin Ryan from talking about them on Facebook.
right.
And the judge at the time, the judge was oh God, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank, because there's also another guy
You
up
talking about the TRO one?
in Lake. There's also another guy with the same name in Lake County.
It was yeah. Now, if you hadn't asked me, I'd be able to tell
Now
you.
I'm drawing a blank, but the judge wouldn't even let me speak. And ironically, well, not ironically, I mean fittingly, I didn't even have to say a word, and he denied the TRO.
Right. Because it was protected. It was
because it was
speech.
clearly, I mean, there was a case in Illinois called Flood versus Wilk that said that, you know, this type of
Wow.
communication is entirely protected.
You want to talk about Flood versus Wilk? This is actually something that happened to me, and anybody watching may be able to use this, because they basically, after several years of my parenting case going on, I was very loud and obnoxious about it, posting online and making YouTube videos, and of course they would watch it, and I'm disparaging them. I'm just running them through the dirt, and
Exposing them.
I'm exposing them for what they're doing to me, right? So they go in, opposing counsel goes in and says, we want a restraining order against Ryan so that he can't talk about this stuff online. Now, that original judge, who was from the very beginning in 2014, now here it is 2 or 3 or 4 years later, this corrupt judge, Judge James Paisanka in Cook County, he actually grants the restraining order and effectively grants this gag order that says I'm not allowed to talk about my case publicly. And it was unconstitutional. It was illegal as all hell. So, of course, my loudmouth self said, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to follow this. This is unconstitutional. I'm protected by the First Amendment. And I kept doing this. And I got louder. I got more pissed off.
Which is, by the way, how I got to know you.
Yeah, which exactly. And that's how Ted and I even met in the first place. So I get louder. And what do? They file a motion for contempt saying I'm violating the gag order. So we go back into court. And suddenly, I get into court, and there's a new judge. After how many years, there's another judge, secondary judge, sitting on the bench next to Paisanka. There was a woman named Judge Colleen Daly. And that day, my judge, Paisanka, actually overturned his original ruling. He threw it out, said he had no choice, and it was based on Flood versus Wilk. Flood versus Wilk was a case law that effectively protects First Amendment protected speech in
The context of an ongoing civil proceeding.
in a civil, particularly domestic civil proceeding. I think so. So that was dismissed, and then or overturned rather, and then the very next court date, that new judge, Colleen Daly, who was sitting there almost supervising or observing, she became my new judge. They got rid of Paisanka. So it almost makes me think that the courts were like, hey, this guy is fucking up so bad. He's issuing illegal gag orders that are blatantly and patently unconstitutional. We got to get him out of here. He's going to expose us. So, but yeah, they actually did that.
Well, what are some of the
That's fucking crazy.
Ryan, what were some of the things that Paisanka told you that you never recorded?
Oh, I wish I had. Well,
because if you had recorded, tell us about the things that were lost because you failed to record a few hearings.
Well,
and this is before I met you, by the way. So while you were
Right.
representing yourself.
One of the things that sticks out in my mind from what he said is, and this was the very beginning. Of course, I'm still ignorant to procedure and things, and I remember telling the judge, "Look, I've done nothing. I am a father who loves my son. I have no time with him. I could have just not come to court. I could have just ran. A lot of people do, but no, I'm here. I'm here fighting because I want to see my son. I love my son, and I have a right to do that as a father, as a parent. I have a God-given biological right to
I'm
my
sure
child."
they love that argument, right?
Oh, yeah,
When
I'm
you're
sure.
talking about your fundamental rights.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, here, this is. Yeah. So he loved it, and this is why I'll tell you he loved it. So I'm telling him that you people are keeping my son from me for absolutely no good reason, and you want to sit here and talk about child support and counseling and GALs and this and this and this. Give me my son. I was the petitioner, and this judge actually had the nerve to tell me, quote, "You don't have any rights until I say you do." God, I wish I'd have had that on camera. I mean, how dare he have the nerve to tell
Approximately
me I
what
have
date
no
was
rights?
that? Or
Oh,
approximately,
I don't
guess, month or
I
year?
would say probably about 2015 or 16. So my son would have been a year or two old. I don't know that I had ever actually even met him yet. I don't think I had. It was before I met him for the first time in the courthouse. There's a story behind that too, but yeah, it was at least 2 years after I had filed. And this guy,
And that's a
this
direct
crook.
quote.
that's a direct quote.
Something that you would never forget.
I'll never forget that, and I'll testify to that. That's hand on the Bible, honest to God truth. Yeah, he told me, "You don't have any rights until I say you do." What kind of person is so self-important, so egotistical, believes that they have such high, grandiose authority to tell another human being standing before them in a legal dynamic that you don't have any rights until I say you do? That is a fucking God complex. It's disgusting. I mean, how is that person?
It's communism.
Yeah, it is. How is that person sitting on
That's
the
part of
bench?
the reason I'm going to show my shirt. I got this shirt.
I love the shirt.
I got this shirt at a trade show here.
Yeah.
This is I used to, before I got involved in domestic relations court, I fought communism. No joke. I lived in Washington, and I worked with Congressman Tim Ryan and former Congressman Duncan Hunter on getting tariffs on China for undervaluing the currency, and I fought that. We were fighting the Chinese directly because this was bill directly targeted towards China. But what the Chinese were doing were outsourcing all their, dirty work to Wall Street, to the Fortune 500, saying, if you're not going to get access to China, to our market, if you don't kill these kinds of proposals, if you don't keep the the Chinese goods coming in, cheap, and displacing U.S. industry. You ExxonMobil, you Disney, you this, you're gonna pay. And so that's how I really got started in public policy. I worked for a congressman for 5 years, Southwest Side Democrat, the old Reagan Democrat. He actually voted for Reagan. His name was Bill Lipinski. A sitting Democratic congressman voted for Reagan, one of those. And so he was, odd, it was really like your old time Rust Belt Democrat. And I worked with the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee personally and his amazing staff. And we got this bill started that would put tariffs on China by a percentage of how much they undervalued their currency, which could have been at that time, like we're talking 40, 45%. So basically the Trump tariffs 10 years before Trump. And I started working with people like Peter Navarro at the time, who just got started into this field. He ended up becoming Trump's trade and manufacturing director and doing some of the most amazing things. And then the Trump Commerce Department implemented our proposal into regulations, which was to allow tariffs, for illegal subsidies in the form of currency undervaluation. So I'm used to fighting communism. It was more of an economic war, out in D.C. But boy, did that prepare me, and some of the intimidation that they used, to intimidation on our political leaders. I mean, look, you just saw Nancy Pelosi threatened by China for going to Taiwan. And imagine what they're going to do to our business community. They're not going to survive. They're not, our business community is not going to survive without income. And so the Chinese have even a stronger role on them. But what the Chinese are doing to their own citizens, social credit scores, and all these norms imposed on the population and on an authoritarian manner, and human rights violations that we all know about. And that mindset is what Ryan just described in Judge Paisanka. A communist, authoritarian, no, you don't have any rights. See, in China, they have rights on paper.
Yeah.
In Russia and Soviet Union, they had rights on paper. But they didn't. And when I was with Roman Brick, Roman was mentioning, that he's a scholar, he is an Israeli and a Jew, very much scholared on World War II history and communism and fascism. And Roman reminded that Nazi Germany had a court, but it wasn't a real court. And so what I can't understand is what is going on where this is so widespread, so pervasive. Why is this segment of the population, unmarried parents, why are we their guinea pigs? Well, why are we their prey?
Well, we're a farm.
And why are they doing it?
What are you going to say?
Well, I said we're a farm. It's profitable to them. This is one of the largest industrial complexes in the world, is the family court system. And if you even look at other countries like Australia, for instance, so I was just talking about Flood versus Wilk. Now, Flood versus Wilk got my gag order overturned, and during that time, I was doing a little bit of research in other places, and in Australia, it is actually law that you can't talk about this stuff. So that's communism too. When you put on paper and have an authority, basically backed up by guns, or men with guns, that says you can't talk about your case publicly because of what we're doing to you, you legalize this being secret behind closed doors. So when you do that, you create a farm of people, and this is why they always protect the aggressive parent, the alienating parent, or the disillusioned parent, because it is very, very profitable. I mean, we're talking about multiple hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Follow the money. It's always, if you look at anything in politics or power or government, it's always about follow the money. And so I wanted to touch on, we were talking a minute ago about how I actually met Ted, or we met each other, and this
I
comes.
just want to stop for a second
Sure.
before you go there. If people that are watching this, okay, I'd love to have a poll on why is this happening. Like I still honestly don't fully understand, because in the Soviet Union there was a clear power structure, and there was a top down sort of, I mean, all these things were directed from the top. But what I still don't quite understand is I don't think that there's necessarily a puppet master. Maybe there's a group. Maybe this is all a product of an ideology, and we have groupthink. Dave, politics and money.
Yeah.
Is that it? It could be it. It could be
It's
simple
money.
as follow them, like Ryan was saying, is follow the money.
Yeah.
This is an industry, and industries breed themselves, like what Eisenhower warned about with the military-industrial complex. Is one thing, once things get started, it just goes out of control. What else?
Well, and it happens. I mean, it happens in even police departments. Look at you have small.
With James.
Yeah. Well, you have small town. I was going to say, in terms of the money, you have small town police departments, and the federal government gives them things like MRAPs and bazookas and tanks and shit that they don't need. But then the police departments have to find a way to justify it, to justify the existence of the money that they've been granted, and the rules are that if you don't use it, you lose it. And so within a certain amount of time, these police departments have to find a way to utilize these MRAPs and these grenade launchers, and they in turn, instead of using it on terrorists, like what it's intended for, they use it on citizens so that they can justify their existence. So in the same sense, the family court uses their power, their perceived authority, to justify their own existence. If they go in, if you're say you're an unwed parent.
You should look at the camera, by the way.
I'm thinking. You go in as an unwed parent, and say you potentially have a minimal amount of conflict, and you think maybe there's potential for agreement in the parties. The courts don't like that. They want to drag this out because it's profitable. So they intentionally create conflict and divide. They like Ted has said before, the first rule of war is attack communications and supply. So that's what the courts do with these couples and these people with children, is they attack the communication. They put a divide between the two and pit them against themselves. And then that perpetuation of conflict then feeds the machine. And so they continue to justify their own existence rather than solve the issue, rather than
right. And I'm going to stop. And there's along the same theme that you had. I remember a quote a while ago where I think a psychologist mentioned that the two ways that hate is expressed is through dehumanization and criminalization. And I can witness this from talking to attorneys privately. This may be more like their excuse or how they live with themselves. So how could a moral person live with themselves for basically being a racketeer and a child trafficker every day? You couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So what these people do is they've really conditioned themselves to hate their clients
Mm-hmm.
and the class of unmarried parents. Mm-hmm. Hate them and dehumanize. They're worse than dirt. Well, I'm taking his money as a charity because what he can't be trusted with his own finances.
Right.
That kind of attitude. And then of course criminalization, they do that when they throw you in jail for not paying GAL fees or being late on child support and not caring whether you can pay or not. I mean, that is it has gotten out of control, and it's spiraling downward. I'm really not convinced that this is over. I think we're just starting to get to an awakening. Like, we're getting there. And when I worked in Washington in 2005, that was 10 years before Trump. I had meetings with Democratic leadership canceled when they found out what we were talking about. Tariffs on China. They wouldn't even meet with us. And this was the steel industry and metalworking and established industries. They wouldn't even talk. But then the momentum, and you never know who the savior is going to be. But we're at that stage where, you know, we're the ones that are blowing the alarm on what's happening. The complete communism, authoritarianism creeping into our own society. You know, this desire to control a large segment of the society that's getting only bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. In ways that's if you brought the Supreme Court to any family court and they saw what was going on, they wouldn't believe it. Because they our highest courts have done their job, but everyone else literally gives them, it's the judiciary giving them the finger, giving our highest courts, these people, our lawgivers, our greatest, you know, legal champions, given the finger.
I think partially too, you know, like you just said, you see this type of thing, the courts or even the people see these things, and I think this is part of our struggle in getting this stuff out there and in putting accountability on these people, is because most people don't believe it. You don't necessarily think that this is actually occurring until you've been through it. So when you have these courts, take Ted's situation for instance. He's been fighting for his kids for several years. And to address a question earlier in this thread, no, I still haven't seen my son. He's 8 years old, and it's been almost 4 years since I seen him last. I had a few months with him. Before that, I didn't see him then. So almost an entire 8 years, I still haven't seen my son.
But what month and year did Judge Colleen Daly say that you were never an endangerment to your children in a written order?
That was what, February of 21. Was it
a year and a half later, after the judge ruled that he was never an endangerment to his children, meaning how many of us have a clear pass?
Yeah. Well, that's
a clear, you know, where we have been affirmatively adjudged to have never done anything wrong to our kids. How many married people have that?
Right.
And Ryan does, and this mother's still getting away with gatekeeping her children, and the Cook County courts are still going along with, you know, reunification counseling, which the other side has tried to sabotage.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the part of the perpetuation of conflict. It's you know, how many GLs have I had in my case? 5, all of which have racked up $10,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 fee petitions. You know,
no, Ricky Amon and Anna Bush said that they each incurred $70,000
a piece. And that was
while they did no work.
They did absolutely nothing.
I'm telling you, gangster shit.
Yeah, it is gangster shit.
These people are gangsters. Like they were complaining, and they of course took it out on Ryan.
Yeah.
That he wasn't paying them $70,000 to sit at hearings in which we explicitly told them we don't want you there.
They did nothing. I mean,
they did nothing.
When we say nothing, we mean that in the most definitive way possible. They did nothing. In fact, there were times during this hearing where fat ass Ricky Ament, who looked like what's the guy from Star Wars, the big chubby,
that fat waiter guy in Star Wars 2.
This guy looked just like him. His mannerisms were the same too. But this fat bastard sat in his chair. It was on Zoom, and he sat in his chair. And there were times where it looked like he was dozing off. I mean, this guy is sleeping. You're telling me that you're billing $400 an hour, and you're sleeping half of the time. You know, it's and that's what makes it a racket. I mean, there's no services rendered here. These people aren't providing an actual service. They're doing it through their authority of their self-justification of existence. And there's absolutely no recourse for it. I mean, the laws are irrelevant.
Do they think that we're stupid?
Yes.
I mean, do they think that we're so stupid? I mean, that's part of the dehumanization. Do they think that we're so stupid that we can't figure out and articulate what they're doing?
Right. Well,
I'm 45 years old. You're how old am I?
35.
35. Ryan's 35. James Kelly is older than we are, and like we haven't been on this earth long enough to know what an honest service is.
Well, here, I'll tell you this. So after Judge Colleen Daly issued this order after our 9-day hearing that I had never have endangered my child, right? It was backwards. It's supposed to be the other way around. The law says I'm presumed fit until after a full hearing they make a finding of endangerment, which they never did. But they did this by proxy, like just some summary way of doing it, and then they take my kid from me and say that that's lawful, which is not. So Judge Daly, after all this long hearing, they reverse it effectively and say, okay, you've never endangered your child. Oh, no, I forgot what I was thinking. You got up and I got distracted. And now I forgot. Yeah, it was about. Okay. So after this order is entered, then I should see my son, right? You would think that's the law. That's what's on paper.
You're affirmatively adjudged to be fit.
Yeah. So I'm now fit. The law says I'm fit. I have every right. I have a reasonable right to reasonable time with my son. What do? And then I'm addressing what Ted said about if they think we're stupid. So I have the right to see my son now as a matter of law. And what do? They, instead of letting me see my son, they issue an order for me to see reunification counselors. Now, why do I need to be reunified? Well, because I haven't seen according to them, I haven't seen my son in 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 years.
But you're
because of them.
But you're presumed not to be able to reunify yourself.
Exactly. Well, and that's
someone
I'm
else.
incompetent.
Someone else
Stupid.
who's never met this kid and never spent any time with this kid.
Right.
Is necessary to help Ryan fix their fuck up.
Right. So they fucked it up. Now they want to fix their fuck up by fucking it up worse. And then what they do is then they continue to presume that I'm stupid and incompetent, and they send me to these reunification counselors, which is also unlawful as well. The law says that unless there is, the child has been found to be impaired by one of the parents' behavior, they don't have a right to order counseling, reunification counseling. So they order this, and so I say, okay, fine, I'll play along. Let's do your reunification counselor. I'm gonna try. So that's what I do. I reach out, and we had one. I'm not even going to talk about the first one because she was a clear-cut scam artist, and so she withdraws. So we get another one, and this one I say,
which,
okay.
by the way, during this entire time, the mother, Sandra Shippers, who's now married to a woman, is frustrating this in every way, calling the reunification counselor, trashing Ryan to the reunification counselor after all the legal issues had already been resolved.
Right. So what these reunification counselors do, the first thing is they don't define scope. So they are given this like proxy authority to drag this out as any way they would like. So they don't have any clear-cut rules that they have to abide by, which means that they can do this for years. They can put you in this counseling and then do it for years, and they'll admit to it. That's the craziest part, is that you ask them, how long does this usually take? Well, we've had some that do months, but a lot of times we've had several years. So you're telling me the courts have taken my parenting time away unlawfully. I've never done anything wrong, no allegation of abuse, no finding of endangerment. You're going to take my son for several years, then give him or give me an order saying I have the right to see him, and then make me go through this, and then provide absolutely no scope. So you've now taken 8 years of my life in this, and you're going to take another 8 by running me through the racket of the counseling. And then at how many? What is that? $200 a session. So they dragged us out.
The second one in his case, literally in her communications, stated that she was basically going to retry what had already been resolved in court.
So that was the second point.
Like, she was literally going to go, like, that's not what you're here for. You're here to connect A and B. You're here to connect 2 dots.
Well, and
that's all you're here for. And in fact, I've got, if you look to my feed, I've got a video evidence deposition with Dr. Ron Dockman, where he testified to the ARDC that court-ordered clients are favored clients because they're captive and they're more compliant.
Mm-hmm.
They literally, I mean, you're giving, just like you're giving immunity to judges, you're literally giving a blank check and hoping that the counseling profession is more ethical than the legal profession.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so what my second point of that was, like what you, just to elaborate on what you just said, was they drag out the scope of it, but they are in fact power tripping, egotistical narcissists. And so the second counselor that we had, I'm onto their game. I realize what they're doing. So the first one, she doesn't want to define scope. She wants to rehash the entire 9-day hearing that we had and relitigate it through counseling. Which effectively...
Tell me how that's healing.
Right, but effectively it drags it out. It's not healing, and they know that it's not healing. We know that it's not healing.
Continuing conflict that the judge went out of her way to put aside.
But it drags it out. It affords them to be paid over and over and over and over again for this. So we call her out on it, and she says, well, fuck you guys, and we got rid of her, okay? So now there's another one. The judge says, oh, okay, so, let's try a different way. So she appoints this new reunification counselor. And it seems promising. I have my initial interview with her, and she's real polite and nice and friendly. And kind of sort of answering my questions, and I say, okay, this is fine. Let's schedule a date. Okay, sure. Let's do it Tuesday, whatever it was. I said, okay, perfect. I will see you Tuesday. Monday night, I got kind of a little bit beside myself and in my head, because I'm like, you know what, I want to know what's going on here. I don't want this to be another 4 or 5 year long process. So I send these people an email, and this is something that I think a lot of people can take advice from in terms of their own cases. So what I did was I wrote this woman an email. I was very polite, very professional. I didn't use any profanity. I wasn't angry. I wasn't mean. And I just asked her a series of Socratic method questions.
Not Socratic. You were asking to define the scope and treatment plan. What are
Well,
you
when I
trying
say-
to do?
when I
What
say-
are your objectives?
Right. Well, they were Socratic, because when I say Socratic, I mean logically consistent. Logically consistent. So by what I'm saying is how long have you how long have you done this? How many children have you counseled in reunification therapy? Of those children, how many of those children were estranged from their parent or alienated by the other parent? Is there a clear-cut method for which you define how a child is alienated or estranged from their parent? Of the estranged children, how many have you done that were successful? How many have you successfully reunified? Of those that were successfully reunified, how many of them, so on and so forth. I say Socratic because there's a logical, chronological order in which these questions are being asked. And I ask these questions, and then I'm asking about scope. How long is this going to take? When will my child be present? Is there anything that I can do to help speed along and expedite this process? So I'm being interactive, right? I'm participating as a client that you would think that someone who's actually providing a service would appreciate. I send the email. I said, thank you very much for your time. I look forward to our session tomorrow. I hope that you can answer these questions effectively as possible. And I look
hold
forward
on.
to their
And one of
answers.
those questions were, what do you believe is reunification counseling?
Yeah, I'm just asking for
define it
definition.
me.
Right. All I'm
What-
doing is asking for definition.
And so what he's asking for is what everyone should ask for, which is the scope and treatment plan.
Right.
That is the number one thing. If you're going to a fiduciary relationship with anybody, whether it's
Right.
an accountant, a tax lawyer,
Anybody, construction worker, you got a contractor to build your deck. You should know
what are
they
you
doing?
What are we? An agreement. This
Yeah.
is called basic contract.
Right. How long is it going to take? What procedure and steps are you going to take to make this happen? How much is this going to cost me? What steps are you going to use in terms of the quality of the wood that you're using? I want to know what kind of screws you're
Right.
using.
What type of
What
treatment?
kind of
Are you using?
sealant are you going to use?
Are you using family therapy? Are you using
Right.
psychoanalytic therapy?
These-
Like, are you going to use black paint or white paint?
Exactly, right. So these are like fundamental, basic, respectable questions I ask. So I send the email, and I'm polite. I say, hey, I look forward to hearing your answers to these questions. I look forward to our treatment plan. And moving forward, I'd like to spend some time with my son. She doesn't reply. The next day, or what was it? Yeah, it was the next day. We had court. We go into court. Very first thing that gets addressed in court, the judge says, well, everybody, I received an email from the reunification counselor that we recently appointed. She told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she said she told me that Ryan, Mr. Taylor, sent us an email last night that we believed was highly inappropriate.
Yeah.
And that's what she said,
Yeah.
verbatim, highly inappropriate. And we are no longer able to assist Ryan or his son in this case.
Yeah.
So she withdrew. You know why she withdrew? It's not because I was inappropriate. It's not because I was angry or talking shit or being insulting or denigrating. It's because I called your bluff. I called your bluff. I know exactly what you people are doing. You're a scam artist. You're trying to shake me down for money for the course of several years. You're going to use my son to do it. That's fucking child trafficking. And I called your bluff, and you thought, well, there's no way we can pull the wool over this guy's eyes. He's on to us. And you withdrew.
That's
Because you
exactly
knew you weren't going
what
to get
happened.
fucking nothing from me.
That's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
And since
Yeah,
then,
good
there's
riddance.
been no further activity.
And that's it.
No
That was-
further activity in his custody case.
Yeah.
After getting
It was a year ago.
a restriction that was entered without a motion or a hearing back in 2018, getting that thrown out in 2021. A year and a half later, he got caught in the cottage industries, where they fuck with people after they win.
Right. Yeah, I
I
effectively
mean,
won
and,
on
and that's
paper.
what happened to me when I got my judgment vacated by the First District Appellate Court. We don't care. We're not going to give you a hearing for 2.5 years.
So to address Stephen just asked, can you ask for another hearing? Well, here's what happened after that. So we have another hearing after that, and I'm fed the fuck up now, right? I'm done. I'm tired. I'm so sick of this round and round little grab ass game that we're playing through the court system, and they're using my son as a hot dog on a string to get me to keep coming back. So the next hearing we had, it was a status, I believe, and I basically tell the judge, listen, judge, and I'm pissed at this point. I said, listen, no more fucking games. Stop playing with me. You put in an order that I've never been in endangerment to my son. So the law says I have a right to my son. The law doesn't say you have a right to your son with reunification counseling or with this or blah, blah, blah bullshit. Give me back my fucking son and stay the fuck out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I said. And then she goes, oh, and she starts getting fluttered, and she's uncomfortable and this and that. I said, I'm fucking done. You people need to give me back my son, and if you don't, I'm gonna start getting louder. I'm gonna start showing up at people's doors. I'm gonna start going to those fucking schools. I might show up at your fucking door. What are you people gonna do about this? And she mutes me and then kicks me out of the courtroom. And about an hour later, that was the end of that status call. About an hour later, we get an email from the coordinator of the court. That judge, who had just been my judge for the last 2 years, she what's the word? Withdrew. She recused herself. She recused herself from my case. Gone. Goodbye. So now I'm without a judge. The judge that was just in this, that made this order, now I'm without a judge. And what do? I get referred to a new judge, and he's just like the rest. And I end up actually filing for recusal as a matter of right, because this guy just starts talking about money. Actually, the real reason I said that I wanted a recusal as a matter of right is because I record these hearings sometimes, and opposing counsel says, oh, his name is Michael H. Minton. And he says, oh, Mr. Taylor records court proceedings, and we can't do this online, and blah, blah. The judge actually agreed with him, and he says, Mr. Taylor, are you recording? I says, it doesn't matter if I'm fucking recording or not. You people are breaking the law. Well, if you're recording, I'm going to ask you to stop recording, and from now on, we're going to be doing these proceedings in person. So effectively, what I'm hearing is, you don't want me to expose what you're doing to me, so you're going to you want to drag this in person where there are no cameras, no audio equipment, so you can fuck me even harder behind closed doors. So I did a recusal as a matter of right, and obviously that was granted to me. So that's number. Now we're at number 3, judge number 3. I got another judge, and he basically does the same thing. It's just not over and over and over. So I'm on my 4th judge, 5th GAL. It's been a year and a half since the order that says I've never been an endangerment to my son, and I've still not had time with my child. This is criminal. It is absolutely fucking criminal what these people are doing. And there's nothing we could do about it, not as an individual.
Reunification counseling is not defined in statute.
No. Or in the psychological
or in
community.
any psychological literature of any kind. I have testimony from Dr. Ron Dockman, again, on my site, where he testifies to that and admits it. It's not defined anywhere. It's more like family systems therapy is the closest thing. Why are we giving these people a blank check, basically immunity when they're court appointed, to literally do whatever they want?
Yeah.
Including after parents are judged fit.
Well, and the fucked up part of it, I'll reiterate what I said earlier, that these people are egotistical maniacs, narcissistic maniacs. When this all happens to you, now I haven't seen my son in 8 years. You people have run me through the ringer. You made me do a 9-day hearing on this woman battered me and my son, and the police didn't give a shit and didn't even do an investigation, and then took a DCFS letter that was unfounded later and waved it around court and took away my son.
Without a hearing.
Without a hearing, without a motion. So you violated my due process rights. You victimized the victim. You gaslighted me and shit all over me and took my kid away and used him as a hot dog on a string.
And he recorded the whole thing.
Yeah, but aside from all of that,
and he recorded the whole thing, including her slapping him, pushing him down to the ground.
It was crazy.
Recorded.
But anyway, even aside from all that, because we can talk about that stuff too, but to stay on my main point here is that even after all of that shit, at the end of the day, when I go into court and I'm like, okay, enough is enough. Give me back my fucking child, you fucking crooks. Which I've done in court. I've literally told these people to go fuck themselves. Ted has told these people to go fuck themselves. What do? They gaslight you and say, Mr. Sir, you're being angry. oh, it's because you're dying, or it's because you're mentally unwell, or it's because instead of just saying, yeah, you know what, this person has a right to be angry. Of course they're fucking angry because they've been completely screwed by the judiciary and the
But
court
that's
system.
part of the dehumanization.
It's part of the yes,
that's part of the
absolutely, right.
dehumanization is that these
They
people
play
are
with you. They
are
fuck with your
lower
head.
forms of life,
Right.
and emotions that including anger and hate,
Yeah.
which we all recognize exist among humans, we're not allowed to have.
100% child trafficking.
It's all part of control, and it's all part of suppression of speech and expression.
Mm-hmm.
Because what are we going to talk about? Are we going to be happy?
So I kind of want to address.
We're going to say nice things about these people? Of course not.
No. Well, I want to address something that happened in your case recently. Ted's last hearing, there was a part where the judge said Ted's trying to get a.
By the way, just hold on a second. By the way, I am reading these comments. So
Yeah,
if I don't mention each comment, I am reading them. So what do? We'll talk about that, Dave. That's go ahead, Brian.
Well, what I was going to say is there was a point in time where Ted's like, hey, I need this to be expedited. I don't know what the future brings. I need some resolution right now. I need to see my fucking kids, right? And the judge is saying, well, the best we can do, we're already making special accommodations for you. The best we can do is 3.5 weeks out from now.
More than that.
More than that, something like a month or whatever it was. Unfucking acceptable. But even aside from that, damn it. Now I lost my train of thought again.
Well, let me go back. If we're gonna talk about the appellate remand hearing.
Well, I was just
let me do it.
Yeah.
So before that, I'm going to get into my health. Today was another tough day for me. So on July 20th, I got a CT scan in which about 1.5 centimeter tumor was discovered on my liver. And then I met on August 1st, I went down to Texas, and my oncologist down there looked at the CT scan that was actually taken in Chicago, and he confirmed that that's a spread of the pancreatic cancer to the liver. It's about 1.5 centimeters, and there's possible 1 or 2 more spots that may potentially be tumorous. So that disqualified me from the clinical trial that I was involved in at Baylor. They got my cancer scores from about 2,200 to 290. That's just, I use the CA 19-9 pancreatic cancer antigen score, sort of a benchmark, even though it's not perfect. And there are certain things that can skew it one way or another. Well, so I'm no longer eligible for the clinical trial because the pharmaceutical company only covers treatment unless there's progression. And so the progression was a metastases to my liver. And I've been experiencing fatigue, vomiting, weakness, itching, urine colorization. I've been throwing up bile, which I think is more related to having my gallbladder removed. What are some of the other symptoms? Loss of appetite. I lost about 12 pounds. I'm down to about, I think, 187 now, which is, I haven't weighed this little, and I can't even count. So I got my cancer antigen score back today, this afternoon, that I took on August 1st, and it was at 4,800. So it went down. It started at 2,200, fell to 290 over a period of 6 months during the clinical trial. Then I missed a couple treatments because that's another family court story where my Social Security disability income was going to my ex-wife. Okay, so I missed cancer treatments because they were taking 2/3 of my disability, claiming that I owe child support when I don't. And so anyway, my score went down to 290, then it rose a little bit to 660, and then it just skyrocketed to 4,800, which is high, and I can feel it. I didn't really feel a whole lot of side effects directly related to the pancreatic tumor, but I can tell that something's going on with this infection in the liver. It's causing me, daily complications. So anyway, I don't know much time I have left, but I'm scrambling to get into to find to get an oncologist. The Northwestern University, the closest they can get me in is the 18th. Advocate is opened up a date next Friday, but that's not my regular. That's not the guy I saw before. He's on vacation. I haven't really been treated at all since June 21st, and since then the cancer has gotten much worse. So that's what I'm working on doing, and Ryan has been there for me, and so many others like Amy Albrecht and Megan and Melissa Isaac and others have been here for me like on a big way. Ryan has spent several nights over here. Ryan just happens to be a friend of mine, so he's not working. I mean, we are friends, but it's been very, very, very helpful to me as my health deteriorates. And I still don't see my kids, and I'll get into the I'm going to go a little bit further into detail of what happened in the appellate hearing last week and how we got there, and how fucked up this is. And again, when I've been doing this, and Ryan sitting next to me is sort of at a station that I only started talking about my case about a year ago when I got diagnosed with cancer. I'm normally a private person. I never want to talk about my personal life. I would keep my personal life private, even amongst friends. And so I obviously didn't want to do this, but I've seen this happen to so many people, and including myself, and realizing that the collective, if you will, the masses are the solution to this problem. The mob is what's going to fix this. Mm-hmm. So it's been about a year. Approaching a year since I got diagnosed. I got diagnosed on August 10th of 2021, and we're about 5 days away. And so I'm lucky to be here in many respects. I didn't even think I would make it this far. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and I don't talk about my case that much. I really don't, but I'm going to. So I got fucking railroaded. When I went into court in February 2017, I had 2 overnights with my son on a Thursday and a Saturday, and I had 6 hours, originally 3 hours a week with my daughter, which is still what my ex-wife only wants me to have. Only wants me to see my kids 3 or 4 hours a week. Okay, that's how much of a piece of shit control freak she is, and she's always been that. She's a Mexican bigoted narcissist. Not a good combination, and calls herself a Catholic. I highly doubt that. If I were the Catholic Church, I'd excommunicate her. Hiding behind the piety, which is what narcissist borderlines do. So I fought and fought and fought and fought, and I had counsel at this time. I had Lake Tobac Di Domenico, which is one of the bigger law firms in Chicago, trying to get a hearing on parenting time in 2017. I hired them for the express purpose of getting a hearing on parenting time, which, by the way, I was statutorily entitled to within 120 days, because we never submitted parenting plans. There was no agreement, so you're entitled to a hearing within 120 days. And Judge Jean Cleveland Bernstein refused to follow the law. And so we went on for about a year. And then Judge Bernstein recused herself because, I filed a petition that laid out what she did. She restricted my rights without a hearing or a motion. never granted me a hearing on parenting time when I had all this evidence of abuse by Erica against my son, which I had reported while we were married to her own sister, and all kinds of other evidence that I recently all assembled for this hearing. So then we go another year. So she files her emergency order of protection in August of 2018. It was perjurious, 3 months before the scheduled trial date. Gets my parenting time suspended. The order of protection is denied, but the judge suspends my parenting time until I get anger management. Because I was angry that the Department of Children and Family Services and police came to my house to try to give my children back to my ex-wife on a false choking allegation. I wasn't allowed to be upset about that. Okay, the reason why I was so upset about that is that it happened in the first place. Because I've been warning these people, and she had already called the cops 31 times, gone to the police 31 times. And I hadn't seen my kids in a week, and the first time I see them, I've got a fucking idiot DCFS worker at my house. Okay, and an investigation that would become unfounded. So I filed a motion to continue, and I had, all kinds of issues. They sent me to a counselor where my son, completely exonerates it, Daddy, all I want to do is see you for Christmas. I'm not afraid of you. I have no idea what they're talking about. Well, can I talk to the judge? Who can I talk to? I just want to see you. It's all recorded. And I couldn't get that evidence into the scheduled trial. I filed a motion to continue. They had an ex parte trial without me. I appealed that was entered in February of 2019. I appealed the judgment, and then the appellate court vacated the judgment in 2019 because, one, there wasn't a finding that I'd endangered the children, and then two, there wasn't any final order on parenting time. It was just a bunch of hoops, more hoops and things, for Ted to jump through so the attorneys can bill and bill and bill and bill. Mm-hmm. And frankly, and my ex-wife is happy, but she's the one getting used. She's too stupid to know it.
She's a useful idiot.
Useful idiot. Always useful idiots. So after this, and the judge in my case at the time, his name was Judge Carr. He was the one that presided over all this. I tried to appeal him once before, and it got dismissed because I didn't submit it. I had 2 business days to submit an appeal. I didn't get it up in time. So it was dismissed. And so the judge, leading up to this, would always just, why don't you appeal? Well, why don't you go to the appellate court? Why don't you tell the appellate court that? He kept doing that. And then I successfully appealed him, and he was humiliated and hated me for that. Because I was really like only one of 2 people to ever get him reversed by the appellate court. He hated me for winning. And so what did he do? He ignored it as if it never happened. So I never got a hearing on parenting time that the appellate court ordered in December of 2019. And then Judge Carr had left the bench with a brain tumor in June of 2021. So he went about a year and a half. He broke it for a year and a half. And then this case got passed around for 6 months. Then there's been now a permanent judge on this calendar. Her name is Julie Amon. She's had this case for about 6 months, sharing it with Judge Grace Stickler for a little bit, who's the presiding judge of the Domestic Relations Division. So 2.5 years go by where I do all the things that I was supposed to do in the judgment that got vacated. All the hoops and things I did. Okay? I went to a reunification counselor who did the same thing that Ryan described. 5.5 months I don't see my kids for reunification counseling. Okay, then I fired the guy, and then nothing happens for a year and a half. The guardian ad litem does nothing. Okay, the attorneys are stringing this out. Erica's stringing this out. And so what happens in the interim from the time that the appellate court order is vacated, or the judgment is vacated by the appellate court up until the present? Okay, hi Amy. I got an emergency order of protection entered against me for putting a sign outside my ex-wife's condominium protesting the violation of the appellate order. And then I went to the Park Ridge Police and asked for a well-being check because I tried to talk to my kids and she refused to let me do it. So it's like, okay, Erica, if you don't want to answer the intercom, you don't want to answer your calls, so I know how my children are doing while you're concealing them from me, I'll just have the cops come over and have them check on my kids for me, which I did. And then so they filed an emergency order of protection. This gets a little complicated. So they filed an emergency order. No, they didn't. They didn't even file an emergency. They filed a motion that I should get supervised visitation because I put a sign outside her window asking for a well-being check from the police and then having the police come over. Okay? It calling her a child abuser, which is what she is. The court-appointed psychologist already called her a child abuser. Okay? So, you know, and that the court and its officers were engaging in a form of neglect, you know, emotional abuse. So I wasn't defaming her. I wasn't charged with defamation because if I was, it would be true. But they claimed that it was harassment, that I'd harassed her by putting one sign up, bringing attention to the fact that these scumbags are violating a binding order of the appellate court. Everyone. So I get an emergency order of protection entered against me. And then we go up to December. He continues the emergency order illegally for an extra 2 months. And then we get to December of 2020. We have a hearing on what's called a plenary order of protection that lasts for 2 years. And the judge doesn't enter, he enters a plenary order of protection for harassment against me, but not for the sign. He, despite already in the prior hearing saying he doesn't care. I went to my son's school on September 23rd, 2020, just to see how they're doing. There was no order preventing me from doing that. In fact, the judge, I had him recorded in October of 2019 saying I had a right to see my kids, to go to extracurriculars, health, education. So I went to the kids' school just to see how they're doing. Okay, and then Erica's attorney sent the school an order that the appellate court held was vacated. So I got accused of violating an order the appellate court held was not in effect by simply going to the school. The judge enters the plenary for me going to the school when I allegedly was breaking an order that wasn't even in effect. And which he even said himself I had the right to do. So they just did a complete Lucy pulls of football 180 on me. And then on top of that, they're breaking an appellate order called In Re Marriage of Jackson from 2000, which says that even if you enter an order of protection against someone, that's not a substitute for a custody judgment. A custody judgment has a much broader best interest, you know, analysis factors, much more criteria than what's in an order of protection. So number one, I didn't even see my kids. I didn't do anything to my kids. The only thing what I got bashed for was trying to see my kids when they were unlawfully preventing me from doing that. So we had this hearing last week in which a lot of the subject material has to do about things that happened while the judge's predecessor was violating the appellate order. You know, and having to, you know, well, there's an order of protection in effect, Mr. Bush, you know, for no one knows, you know, and Judge Carr, you know, he's on video, the former judge in this case, where a woman by the name of Olga recorded her proceeding. She says, Judge, what am I accused of doing? Something that happened 5 or 6 years ago. Well, this is literally what the judge said. Well, you tell me. The fact that you don't know tells me something. No, she's asking you what she's done because she doesn't think you know and you don't. You didn't have a clue. I know he didn't have a clue. And a lot of these judges don't have a clue. So I had to spend a lot of time educating this judge to the best that I can of these temporary orders that were entered after the appellate court ordered them to enter a final judgment. I mean, unbelievable. You want to say something?
I do want to say something.
I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm seeing a lot of comments here. I'm gonna sit here for a second. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of comments here, and they're good points. I'm seeing, you know, why don't let's see, what's this one say? I don't know how to scroll up. You know, why aren't the judges going in their chambers and discussing this and interviewing the children to see how much they love you and this and that, or let's move on and let's come to some amicable solution. And These are all good points, and these are human responses. These are things that normal people think. You know why they don't do that? And this touches back on the original point that I made earlier, is this justifies their existence. They are trying to kill Ted. They are trying to drag this out as long as possible because this is what they are. They are not mediators. They are not people who are put in place to mitigate conflict. They are in fact creating conflict and stirring up conflict because they have no other purpose. These people are not trained to fix problems. If they really wanted to, and this is why they do this, is because if in the beginning, if they were to come down and do exactly what you folks have said, hey, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? If they do that, that makes sense, right? That makes the most logical, reasonable sense. If they do that, they lose their jobs. They can't get enough people in there fast enough to actually make a significant, substantial profit. Here, I'll move back over. Because it's not about, hey, it's not honest work. When you go and you have a job, say you're a plumber and you go to a job and you say, hey, this is a $2,000 job. You're walking away with $2,000. But if you're a corrupt plumber and you've got the long arm of the government assisting your corruption in your fucked up plumbing trade, you can go in, and this is what they do. They go through the house and they open up walls and they cut holes in the walls to access every little pipe, and then they replace some of these pipes with broken pipes, and then they'll throw some shit down your dishwasher disposal and get it all greasy, and then they got to call another guy in to fix that. Then they got to call a drywaller in to fix the holes that they punched in the walls, and then there's no and so you can't do anything about it because they're protected by the long arm of the government. So the point is that they don't get just the $2,000 that the honest plumber charged for the job. They turn a $2,000 job into a $200,000 job and an 8-year progression of the job, because this is not honest work. This is an industry designed to make profit. It is designed to traffic children and use their parents as pawns, pit them against each other, and use the children as a way to sign checks. That's all this is. This is not honest. This is not government. This is not even real court. These people are mafia.
It's racketeering.
So the point is that I was originally making is that you guys are all saying things. Well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? And why don't they put this into place? And yeah, all those things make sense. They can't do that because this is what justifies their existence. The mafia didn't go and do real work for people and say, well, this is how we're going to make our living. No, they extorted people. They shook people down. They monopolized entire city blocks and shook down the business owners because these people don't produce anything. They don't actually provide or produce anything of value. They just steal it and beat it out of people, and they use children to do that. They use children as their pawns. These people are not normal, rational, compassionate human beings. They are all parasites. They are actual monsters. So that's what's happening here. Everything that Ted just told you.
When they're intruding on the family and basic family rights, that makes them predators.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was going to say,
and not to mention the fact that these are attorneys that are doing it, officers of the court sworn to uphold the Constitution.
Right. Well,
and these people are engaging in child trafficking on an industrial scale.
The other thing I was going to say is you listen to Ted talk for the last, say, 5 or 10 minutes, and he talked about orders of protection. He talked about having to put signs up outside the house because this woman's abusing people. There's counselors involved.
I was calling them out.
Yeah, and so, but
I was calling them out, and I got my rights to my kids taken away for trying to see my kids while they're breaking the law.
If these people were actually trying to solve problems as they purport themselves to be, it would have never gotten that far. There wouldn't be orders of protections. There wouldn't be CPS and DCFS at Ted's door where he has to kick them out. And then they do this. It's one thing after another. They light the match, and then they watch the fire burn, and then they pretend that they go in and they clean it up, when really they could have extinguished the match in the very beginning. This is what justifies their existence. And the quicker that the mass public comes to terms with the fact that these are not real courts, that these people are not government officials, that they are in fact just parasitic mafia overlords, the quicker that we're actually going to come to a resolution here, that people actually are having relationships with their children and not having to deal with this conflict. There is no reason, Everybody you talk to, and there was another point I wanted to make earlier about how we met. Everybody, and I'm sure almost every single one of you in this comment thread, everybody I talk to that's going through this, they say, I don't see my kids. I haven't seen my kids in several years. There's always orders of protections. There's always some type of allegation or lack of allegation of abuse. Some type of, he's crazy, gaslighting, oh, he did this, and there's no ever any evidence to support it. There's always several police reports. So there's a lot of things that are following patterns in everybody's cases that show that, okay, something's broken, something's not working. It's not broken. That's exactly the point. That's what they're doing. They're doing this on purpose in order to drag this out over the course of years. There is no reason that someone involved in a marital dispute or dispute with another adult human being who has a child in common, why this should be going on for actual decades. None. Why is this going on for decades? Why are people not seeing their kids for several years, not just 1 or 2, but 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 20 years? It's because this is a system that is well
It's a game of
oiled.
keep away. And
It
what
is,
what these
Because of money. It's
well,
always all
it's
about the
because
money.
of the money, and it's because a segment of the population has personality disorders, the cluster B personality disorders, where they have no empathy, they have a sense of entitlement, and a self-image that is unrealistic, and all they care about is projecting an image that is unrealistic.
Yes, Dave, stop playing by the
It's
rules.
narcissistic, and then
They don't even follow the
and
rules.
then some of them have attachment disorders, where they're just frightened beyond belief of losing control, losing, relationships. So they destroy the relationships for other people. And these people are glommed on. They are the golden goose. There are men and women that are like this. And they ride them as long as they can. And they keep the balance. The balance will be way offset. Okay, but they'll keep the equilibrium for fighting just right at the hottest point, where one person doesn't get, depending, of whether it's a lot of people just give up, and a lot of people expect people to give up.
Well, a lot of people don't believe that this is happening. I've talked to people online and even in person and in groups and things, and some of this stuff sounds so bizarre and so outlandish that they're like, there's a reason you're not seeing your kids. Maybe you're a little, you got a screw loose there, and maybe the courts, because most people are conditioned since we're little bitty babies to believe that the courts are just, that the justice system is a little flawed, but generally it works like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And this is what we're taught since we're in grade school.
Yeah.
And the teachers will tell you this. And this is what we're teaching the next generation.
It's what you see in the movies.
It's what you see in the movies, right? It's romanticized and validated. And this is not the case at all. It's
terrible. So back to the hearing. So this hearing starts, and one of the first things the judge says, Judge Amon, is she says, I'm only going to hear evidence.
See, like right here. This stuff bothers me. Victoria Honorado, she says, by law, they have to prove you're a serious endanger to your children. If she wants to keep this in court, then file for a change.
I've already done that.
Right.
I've done
Exactly.
that long
And this
ago.
is the thing.
All right,
Most people don't believe that this shit is happening because it's so outlandish and they haven't gone through it. It says by law, you have to prove serious endangerment. That's right. That's right.
She knows
They don't follow the law. The
Right.
laws are in,
we know that.
it's crazy.
So we start this hearing, and one of the first things that Judge Julie Amon says, this is the appellate remand hearing 2.5 years later. So on April 1st, she sets it for hearing, originally for May, and then we go 2 months later waiting for a custody evaluation. So this whole process gets delayed where it's the Cook County's custody evaluator. And Erica drags this out too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So she's dragging out the custody evaluation to keep me away from my kids while I'm dying. And so finally, and it wasn't even clear whether we were going to start the hearing on July 27th and 28th, which caused me to panic. Because I know that my health is, not doing that well. And of course, if I tell them that, what's going to happen. You say bye-bye to my rights as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Disability be damned.
Mm-hmm.
So this hearing barely starts. And the first thing that Judge Amon does is she says, I'm limiting the time frame to after 2018. Wait, what?
Yeah, so you didn't get a full.
Wait. So the appellate court vacated this judgment in 2019, and they didn't say you can only consider evidence after the time that he was separated from his kids, because that's effectively what she's doing. What the hell is that? It's like, this case started in 2017. We had, I've got evidence from 2016 about her abusing my children, and her telling various people that there was no abuse in the house, meaning I wasn't doing anything, which I wasn't. She admitted there was no physical violence in the house. Well, there was. It was just her doing it to my then kindergarten son. Basically, Erica was going into narcissistic rage when my son would talk back to her. And it was ridiculous, infantile. Mommy, you're a poopy head. Whack. That kind of stuff. Silly. Getting into infantile dispute. Like, she was infantilizing herself and adultifying my son at the same time. And I've never been able to get that evidence. In 5.5 years, I've never had a true hearing on parenting time. 5.5 years. And now I'm finally having it. The first real hearing on parenting time, 5.5 years later. And the judge says, all right, we're only looking at 2019 forward. How is that fair to me? Okay. They violated my civil rights in 2018. And so she doesn't want to look at any of that stuff. But there's a problem that I don't think that this judge fully realizes yet, which is I filed a federal lawsuit. Okay. And I did a lot better than a lot of people do. I went all the way to the 7th Circuit and got a published opinion from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, in a case called JB versus Woodard, said that this my claims that my constitutional rights were violated, including by the judge, need to be litigated in state court. But at the very end of that opinion, they said if the state court is unwilling or unable to adjudicate these claims, then I may go back to federal court. Okay, so they anticipated, so that the federal court knew that the appellate court had vacated my judgment, which implicated all kinds of Rooker-Feldman and other jurisdictional issues. That is a significant legal event. That the appellate court vacated the state judgment, and I'm waiting for a hearing. This was back in December of 2020. I went before the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. That was a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the federal judges knew that I was waiting for my right for a hearing, rehearing basically. And they wrote in there and presumed that the arguments that my rights had been violated in 2018, which was the core of my complaint, federal complaint. It was against 4 DCFS workers, and then a chain of causation kind of thing, leading to substantive due process violations. That was the argument, and it's supported in case law that you can bring these suits. They said if the state courts are unwilling or unable to adjudicate my claims, then I can go back to federal court. Well, that's exactly what Judge Amon has done. Is saying no. We're only going to review the evidence that you have after your civil rights were violated. How is that fair?
Right.
I mean, that's like falsely imprisoning somebody.
Well, it's also not a full hearing.
It's like falsely imprisoning somebody and then sending them back for a custody hearing where they can only hear evidence of their character while they were falsely arrested in prison.
And in addition to that, you're not seeing your children.
You're not in the camera.
In addition to that, you're not seeing your children. So what kind of evidence can you really bring to the table when you're not seeing your kids?
Hardly.
Maybe the kids are completely screwed and they're in despair and they're like, oh my God, I want to see my parent and we're being abused and we're being beaten, and you go to court and you got nothing.
But actually, all the evidence that I had with my children after 2018 is all recorded and all positive.
Right.
Okay, so the children were never alienated from me, which was the biggest scandal in my case. Is that it was being portrayed, and it was a fraud perpetrated, by the attorneys, Steve Wasco and Erica's counsel, that somehow these children were terrified of me. Never.
No. Well,
never.
So
it was all the big lie. It was all a ploy for control and for custody. And so right now, as we speak, this federal circuit opinion, which is binding, is being violated. Meaning, I don't know if Judge Amon realizes that she's giving me a ticket right back to federal court where I can, push the federal claims that on a false investigation that didn't even occur in Illinois. 2 months after, they come to my house, try to give my kids back to my ex-wife over a court order, okay, with no court order in place, just an oral directive from some stupid ass fat social services worker who's not following her own procedures and a federal settlement agreement, kicking them out of my house after my son denies it. They unfound it, and I don't see my kids for, at that time, it was a period of about 8 months is when I filed the federal lawsuit. And it's gotten even worse. Okay, so right away, this judge has she's about to learn. We're still fighting over the scope of this. But the other thing that happened in this hearing is that the judge insisted on being the questioner. Okay, so the judge is asking, on day one, the judge asked Erica questions. On day two, the judge asked me questions. Okay, and then I was able to cross-examine Erica within the scope of the direct examination. And then on day two, the judge asked me questions, which, I had just finished a 3-day hearing with the ARDC where I was able to give a presentation. For people that are pro se, usually the way courts take evidence is through interrogatory, Q&A, questions by attorneys to the person on the stand. But when both sides are pro se, that doesn't happen. So the judge, I think, had the discretion to do this. And if a judge has questions, obviously they're important questions to the judge. It's actually, I think, a good thing that this is happening. So I was in support of that to a limited extent. But the judge at the same time was really, what she was doing was extremely limiting our ability to present evidence because she says she doesn't want narratives. Well, there are ways you can do this. You can ask yourself questions. Well, why did you go to the school on September 23rd, 2020? Answer, because this. Okay, so you could potentially give the other side an opportunity to object. But when I was before Judge Carr in the very same courtroom, that's how he handled it. That's how he did it. And now this judge is doing something different, which again, I think is okay, but you can't substitute the ability to prevent evidence, which she's effectively trying to do. She is, and then on top of that, the courtroom doesn't have the ability to hear video and audio evidence because they don't have a TV monitor.
Dark ages.
They tell us that the attorneys are the ones that bring in TVs and stands when they want to present evidence. Are you kidding me? Like my grade school had an AV squad where we would walk in a TV. And you're telling me in the entire Daly Center, they don't have their own monitors for their own fucking courtrooms? That you expect attorneys to wheel in these things and get them past security all the way up? So the courtroom can see and hear audio and video evidence? These are courts of law. And so the one video that I played so far, I had to do it on Ryan's laptop and point it, so the court reporter had to see it, the parties had to see it, the judge had to see it at the same time, a very limited screen. I mean, those are some of the things that I dealt with. So the summary of what happened is that this case got continued out a month. And a month while my condition is getting worse. And so we're going back on August 25th and 26th to continue this and to have the custody evaluator testify because she needs to. But in the meantime, I'm experiencing irreparable harm because my health is deteriorating and I'm not seeing my kids. My son called me, and Ryan will attest. My son called me like 3 times in the last 2 days. Yeah. And where we're playing video games together at length.
Yeah, and he has.
But I can't see them. They can't come over to my house. I can't spend time and tell the kids things that I want to tell them.
Well, and I think there's some contradiction. Is there a way to scroll up in the comments here?
I don't have much time. I know. I don't. And these people are continuing this out a month. And then the judge said that normally the judge would be scheduling hearings in November. But she's making room for August 25th and 26th. And Erica said, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do
Yeah,
August
she looked
25th.
like a complete scumbag.
I can't do August 25th and 26th. I can't do September 28th. It's too busy for me." This is what Erica's trying to drag this out even longer. Okay, so she's literally taking my Social Security disability money and trying to keep me from the kids when I have weeks and months to live. And you know, and the Judge Amon said, I don't want any evidence of whether the kids love you and want to see you.
That's what I was going to say.
She said that.
About that.
She said, "I know it. You know, you don't have to say it's in the custody evaluation report. The kids love you and they want to see you." Okay, and so the judge doesn't even want any more evidence on that. So why isn't there a temporary order allowing these children to spend weekends with me, at least 50-50,
Well,
and the remaining weeks and months that I have? I mean, the reason why Erica wants supervised visitation is only for one reason, because she's afraid that I'm going to talk trash about her to my kids. It's all about control. This is control pathology on an epic level.
it's also
Where, I mean, she's committed crimes against me and my children, and she's afraid that the children will know about it before their dad passes away. So she's trying to keep them from me. And the court is going along with it. You know, we'll let this go another 4 weeks. Okay, I have supervised visitation right now because in November, I told my ex-wife, I said, "I'm not going a week without seeing my kid, without speaking to my kids." I said, "You're going to agree to daily phone calls. You're going to give me the name of the children's counselor and the children's doctor, or I'm not returning the kids." It was supposed to be a Saturday at 7. I emailed her 27 hours before the drop-off. Then I emailed her at 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, a half hour. Copy to the guardian ad litem. "Erica, you have to agree to this. Erica, you got to agree to this." And she doesn't respond. What does she do? She goes to the police, tries to get the police to enforce it. And the police refuse to enforce it. They say he's got a reasonable belief that the children are at risk. There's a pending order of protection, a petition against Erica. There's a child abuse investigation against Erica for things that my daughter said in November. We're not going to enforce this, and what he's asking for is reasonable. In fact, what he's legally entitled to. I'm entitled to the name of the doctor and counselor. We had daily phone calls, and it's just inhumane to have a dying father go a week without seeing or speaking to their children. And so at the time, there would be, you know, Wednesdays and every other weekend. And then in certain cases, I would go Wednesday to Wednesday without seeing my kids. I said, that's unacceptable. I filed a motion for daily phone calls on October 13th of 2021. And then Judge Dickler Erica files a complaint, tries to remove my parenting time completely for allegedly not returning the children when I repeatedly offered to, with conditions that were not only reasonable, things that I was legally entitled to. And she turns around and tries to remove my parenting time for not returning the kids one time, when she had withheld visitation twice in the last month and a half leading up to that, violating court orders twice.
Well, again,
She does it twice. I do it once, and I lose custody of my kids. I get supervised visitation and then also for recording court. That's in an order that I recorded my ex-wife tell Judge Dickler that I shouldn't see my kids because I may get sick and die on them. I recorded that. And Erica told the judge that I'd recorded. I put a 1.5-minute segment on my Facebook page. And the judge gave me supervised visitation for recording my ex-wife state that to a court.
which is unlawful. It's
Totally
completely
illegal.
against the law.
Totally illegal. So I'm dealing with these issues that happened in the last 2.5 years where I use the legal process and win, and they deny me my rights, and I have to, now they're pointing to, "Don't look at us, Mr. Bush.
Yeah.
Just don't look at, we're only going to look at how you handled us violating your rights, but we don't want to hear about what we did to you."
Right.
When I have a federal court order that says they must, or the federal courts will.
Right.
That's in a published federal opinion. So they're playing with fire. And I guarantee you they're trying to time me out. They're trying to hope that I die.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
They're trying to time me out.
Well, that's what the ARDC was doing as well.
Yeah.
They wanted to drag this out. They still haven't heard anything back. It's been
Right
weeks
back,
or
yeah.
months. Well, I wanted to say, I wanted to interact with your people here a minute. Whoop, I don't know. Let's see. Hold on. There was something I wanted to say here. No, I can't find it. Oh, it's further up. Well, there's a contradiction happening within the court itself. So someone had asked earlier in the comments, I don't see it anymore, but someone had asked, why don't they just do an interview with the kids and ask the kids how they feel and if they want to see you and they miss you and stuff. Two things. One is that the judge actually told Ted in this last hearing that, listen, I don't need to hear any more evidence of whether or not your children want to see you or miss you or love you or whatever, because I'm acknowledging that they do. Okay? So that the courts have already acknowledged that they don't need,
based upon evidence in the custody evaluation.
right. So they don't need any more evidence. Now, and the other problem is that when you say, well, why don't they do an interview? Well, they effectively did with the custody evaluator. And what actually happens is these kids do want to see him. They do miss him. But when you put somebody in this position of authority in front of somebody who isn't a child, who isn't completely developed and doesn't have those critical thinking skills and things that we do as adults, these children think that they need to appease that person because they're in a position of authority. So you have, I don't know if you guys saw it the other day, but we posted videos from the visitation that Ted had, which was supervised by a friend, but not a person of authority. And what happens? Very first thing, these kids come out. We're sitting on the back patio of this restaurant, and the kids come out, and their eyes light up, and they run right to Ted, and they give him a hug, and they love him, and they miss him, and they spend all this time with him, and that was completely organic. Nothing was coached. They just loved being there. They loved him, and they missed him. Okay, when you have, so you have this obvious evidence that these kids miss him and want to see him. But why is it then in the custody evaluation, that report, there are multiple parts of it where it's clearly coached. It's these kids, especially the younger child, is saying things. It's almost like that she
said that
this is what the person of authority wants to hear.
She said things that she acknowledged that she wasn't even alive for.
Right, exactly. Right.
Which she actually was. She was 18 months old at the time.
They're clearly
But
coached.
literally, I mean, Erica had 2 months old. That's why she wanted to keep me out.
Well,
So she can control these kids, and she coached them to say things that were clearly things that she said that either
right.
the kids never witnessed,
well, I had
or Erica's spin of it, and it was easily transparent. And the custody evaluator called her out on it and said there's clear coaching and manipulation going on.
Right. But I had a point here was that somebody else had mentioned, reunification therapy doesn't work. Well, this is a prime example of why reunification counseling is a scam, and it's a completely unnecessary, because you have how many times did he get ordered to do reunification counseling, actually go through with it, get dicked around for several months and extorted out of all this money.
True.
And now you have actual organic evidence of these kids being in his presence, and they don't need to be reunified. They are already reunified. Just physically reunify them, and that will happen organically. You don't need the additional counseling. Here's the reason why. And this is my ultimate point on everything that I just said. The reason why is because the courts they cannot admit that they're wrong. They have a baseline, right? This is our authoritative baseline. And we can go above that and say, well, we'll extend you some courtesies, or we'll extend you grace, and make ourselves look good. If we help you out a little bit, as long as you're following our orders and our rules, we can extend grace. But what they will not do is go below the baseline. And below the baseline means that they are admitting fault. So we have evidence now. Clearly, you can all see that reunification counseling was completely unnecessary because these kids love him and they miss him, and we have video evidence of that. After several years of estrangement,
But no, not estrangement.
Well, or separation.
Separation.
Right.
All the evidence that I have, I even included the audio of the counseling sessions.
Right.
Where,
So
that was the point. Is all the interaction I had with my kids from 2018 and on, I recorded.
right. So you have evidence.
Daddy, I want to come to your house. Daddy, I want to come to your house. That's what they were concealing. The attorneys were concealing every single piece of evidence that indicated this was all a fraud.
Right. So you have evidence that this is all, obviously it's all a fraud. What the court will not do is admit any fault, because like I said earlier, this is a justification of their existence. If they admit fault, then it shows and tells the public that we are not perfect. And they have to maintain this image of perfection, because if they say that we're not perfect, it undermines their authority, and then people start thinking, wait, maybe they aren't equipped and capable of actually dictating and making decisions like these in people's lives. So they'll never admit fault. They're never ever going to say, hey, you know what, we were wrong. Yeah, we saw the video evidence of the kids and they love him and they miss him, and we shouldn't have ever ordered you to do reunification therapy, and we should have never dragged this out for several years. But they won't do that and actually just fix the problem and allow this man to see his children, because, not for the kids' sake, not for Erica's sake, not for Ted's sake, for their own protection of their own image.
It's more than that.
Authority.
It's more than that, okay? Because the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals decision stated that my kids still have a claim, but they were going to my case could have technically stayed open until the kids turned 18, and then the kids could join as actual party. Well, they were parties. They were minor and next friend, but then they could sue as adults.
Yeah.
Once they become emancipated for what happened to them. And so during this entire time when the court was trying to supervise my parenting time after the appellate court order was vacated, was really interfering with the attorney-client relationship and fucking with 3 federal plaintiffs who were suing another part of the state. But what they're trying to do is the state is trying to supervise the things that I tell my children as a dying father. The things that I want to tell them, that I love them and giving them advice and things that they hopefully won't forget. They're trying to supervise that, and they're obstructing that. They're preventing that from happening, because I think they're all afraid of being sued. They are desperately scared that my children will figure out what had happened to them. Luckily, there's enough of a public paper trail already where I think that they could win for what happened to them these last 3.5 years. I think that they could get substantial monetary damages, and I think it's more than that. I think that there is a concerted effort to cover up and shield the children from any kind of idea of and also these people are concerned about what I'm going to say to the kids about court,
right?
Which is I've never trashed the judges, to my kids. I've always told them that kids, you have to watch out for people that are around it. The people that are claiming to help you, you have to be careful about them. That's all you can say. You can't give them any real practical advice because you don't know what's going to happen at any given time. But they have to be broadly aware of what is happening around them. They shouldn't. They should be shielded from this. But it is my decision as a parent to counsel my children about people that are potential dangers to them. Don't talk to strangers.
Yeah.
It's not that
They're
different than that.
I mean, they are.
That's my discretion. But they literally want someone to spy. And I'm talking to my kids in my family room. Kids, this is what happened. Kids, this is what's going to happen. I want you to be safe. I want you to know that I love you. Mr. Bush, that's not a proper conversation. Why don't you change the subject back to video games? That is oppressive state involvement on an epic level.
Well, my GAL,
these are Democrats.
One of the GALs in my case actually called my son his ward.
Yeah.
My son is not your ward. He is not a ward of the state nor yours. I am still his parent. I'm his legal parent.
And that has to be, and these attorneys, guardian ad litems, get away with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ricky Ament was the one who called his client.
Yeah, his client.
His ward, as if this child had been taken into guardianship.
Because
that's not the statute.
Right. These
people are fact witnesses who give recommendations.
Right.
And in fact, that's the same argument that Steve Wasco used when I recorded the counseling session. He's like, well, did you get permission from Dr. Palin? Yeah, I did.
Right.
He's like, well, why didn't you get permission from me? Because I don't need your permission. And in fact, Illinois case law is clear that only one party has to consent. Only one parent has to consent for the release of medical and psychological records. Meaning that the guardian, there's no way in any law, there's no place in Illinois law anywhere that says that upon appointment of a guardian ad litem, that the parent loses the right to make basic decisions of their children to the guardian ad litem about things involving disclosure of medical and health records, psychological records, including counseling sessions between you and your kids, where you're collecting evidence to use in court because they're not doing their jobs. That's fucked up. That is what these people have turned themselves into. And we have an American Civil Liberties Union that's up to lunch, that's doing shit that is contrary to what they have done over decades. ACLU is a joke. There is literally nobody, almost nobody. We know who they are. There are people that are looking at this and delving into this. But this is as dangerous as it gets. Because what we are doing is imposing on our own population what the communist Chinese have done to their own. Surveillance, gagging, suppression of expression and speech, and imposing rules on private citizens that is effectively the state's agenda. The state intruding into the family, taking the family over, seizing your kids, selling them back, and trying to dictate every aspect of your life to you, trying to control you. And the existential fight that we have as a country is fighting the communist Chinese. We all know that. Okay? How are we going to be equipped to do that when we're destroying our own families and doing the same things that they are? They're just going to point to us. Like I saw the Chinese issued a press release where they accused the United States of treating China like George Floyd by Nancy Pelosi going over to Taiwan. They claim that we treated them. They used that stuff against us. So, this stuff has to get out while it matters, right now. The public has to be aware of what's going on right now because it's going to have medium and long-term consequences on our survival as a society. Because we are, you talk to people like Roman Brick and others, we are falling into the same fascism, authoritarianism, communism, extreme abuses of government and private sector together to commit crimes against the population on a large scale.
And no amount of law will ever change it because they don't follow the law anyway because there's no oversight of any accountability with these people.
So that's it. We have so I'm continued out in my case to August 25th and 26th. And I frankly don't know what state I'm going to be in by the time that gets there. But these people have basically tried to kill me on multiple levels, put me through an enormous amount of stress when I've never done anything to my kids, ever. Never done anything to my wife. Not accused of any sort of violence whatsoever. I'm accused of being angry about what they did to me. You're goddamn right.
So if you've got someone like Ted, who hasn't seen his kids in years, he's terminally ill, his health is declining and suffering, his children are begging desperately to see him. They call him almost every single day. They have wonderful conversations. These kids are not scared. They're not estranged. They're not alienated because they want to see him. He wants to see them. He's never had any kind of abuse, never convicted of a crime. He could potentially not be able to even attend the next hearing because his health is declining. They push him out 3 weeks, dick him around, screw him around, try to take his retirement fund, try to take more money, try to screw this out as long as possible. If someone like Ted, who also, by the way, has helped multiple other people, who has kind of been a beacon for other people, including myself, in the same exact case, if Ted can't even get a leg up here, what does that say about the rest of us?
That's the problem. That's why I'm doing this.
What the hell kind of chance do I have, or you, if you're watching, that you can't see your kids? If he can't even do it, and he's an attorney, he knows all the legal stuff. He knows all the case law and the legislation and the statutes, and he's never done anything wrong. If he can't even get a leg up, I'm fucked. You're fucked too. And so are your children and their children and so on and so forth. And another point I wanted to make
was a second. On November 9th of 2017, an attorney by the name of Heather Smith Groton, who was working for Lake Tobec de Domenico. She still does family law cases. She told me on the phone, after Judge Bernstein suspended my parenting time without a hearing, okay, because I didn't return my daughter one night. I was entitled to Saturday overnights. Okay, so it was all bull, and my attorneys told me what happened. They told me that I can give them a $5,000 retainer to file an appeal, and I couldn't believe this. My attorneys are reporting this to me as an attorney, and I said, what? I can't believe this. And Heather Smith Groton goes, Ted, just so you know, family court judges break the law every day. Okay, so she tells me that privately. Now she's an officer of the court and she's still practicing. Is there any evidence that other than telling their clients this, when they're faced with $5,000 appeal retainers to vacate illegal orders without basic due process, what have they done about it? Okay, the head of that firm, Alan Toback, called the Cook County Domestic Relation Courts a Jewish mafia, and he's Jewish. Alan Toback was. He died a few years ago. So the law firm knows through experience that these judges break the law every single day. And what have they done about it?
It should be noted as well that these judges have absolute authority to issue an order. This judge in Ted's case right now could right now email him back and say, you know what, I'm gonna enter an order tomorrow that grants you unfettered access to your children. We're sorry that this happened. They have the authority to do that. They're not going to do that. They don't want to do that because it undermines their own authority and their own justification of existence. There was something that Judge Amy said.
They're there to perpetuate separation. That's what she said.
That's their purpose. Well, and I wanted to address something Judge Amon said in your hearing. She says Ted was saying, "Hey, this is not acceptable. I need a faster hearing because my health is declining, and I want to see my children. There's nothing legal or on paper or otherwise that it should keep me from my kids. I need a faster date than that." And she says, "Well, sorry, Mr. Bush. I'm paraphrasing. Sorry, we're already booked up. I'm actually doing you a favor here and accommodating you because otherwise we wouldn't get you in until November. So we're going to put you out a month." And this is what she said. "We're going to put you out a month because there are a lot of people that are similar to you in
trying to see your kids
that want to see their kids."
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Now let's think about that for a second. Let's break that down. You're telling me, forget the illness, forget the terminally ill shit. Let's just say, break it down. What is she actually saying there? She's saying that there are so many fucking parents in family court, in that courthouse, that courtroom specifically, that are being kept away from their children, that we can't even get a person who's terminally ill in to finish the hearing so he can see his kids before he potentially passes away. That's insanity to me. So what does that say to you? That says to me that let's just assume that 5% of parents are actually unfit, that there should be intervention and that these people should be supervised and monitored and not allowed access to their children because they're a problem, because they're violent, they're dangerous. Let's just assume 5% of those people, parents that come into the family court system, are actually a problem. Do you think that 5% of that statistic would burden down the courthouse so much that they can't get him in before a month? No. Most people are normal. Most people have a dispute, sure, or marital dispute or whatever, but most people are not a problem. Why is a judge telling this man that there are a lot of people in your situation who can't see their kids? That tells me that actually it's more like the 95% of people that walk through that courthouse are being kept away from their children.
Right.
That isn't protecting.
That's what they do.
That's exactly what they do.
They see that as their purpose.
That is their purpose. This is not a method of protecting children or protecting women or parents or mitigating conflict or loss or arbitrating anything. This is a method specifically to separate children from their parents and dwindle the family unit. to dwindle the power that parents have over their own children. Because over the course of generations of this happening, it's going to become normalized that the court actually has more authority over the children than their own parents do. It's about money. Of course, it's always about money, but this, it is actual communism. There's eventually people are going to actually believe. Think of these kids who are being taken from their parents. That is an epidemic, because eventually it's going to, and it does. It's already been shown that it does. That eventually those children's children are going to have similar experiences. This stuff is perpetual. There's a pattern with it. When 99% of the populace is involved in the family court system and being extorted and so on and so forth, they have now all been conditioned 3 and 4 and 5 generations later that this is normal. And this is not normal. This is not normal.
This is not normal. We're in an extreme aberration
Yeah.
in our society, where this woke liberalism, the supremacy of government, is it's not on a federal level. There might be some federal incentives of misguided legislation. This is being done on the state and local level, into the household. Less than local level. It's going into the household, and they're making it worse. All they have to do is split the proverbial baby with the bathwater. 50-50. You guys work it out. If you don't like it, tough. Okay? I mean, they can put that into the law. I mean, the fact is that we're not getting hearings at all. We're not getting hearings at all on anything. And then in like my case, I got punished for knowing that and basically telling my ex-wife, you're going to agree to this right now, or I'm going to keep the kids until Monday.
Yeah.
That's what else can I do? Because or I'm going to go weeks without talking to my kids while I'm dying. And I got punished for that, for knowing exactly how they operate by the presiding judge of Cook County. Oh my God. I mean, we have, there is so much more to do. And I can say this, I started on the China trade fight and watch that progress, where it's now a mainstream issue, and now Republicans are actually now more supportive than Democrats. This issue is going to get even bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
I keep seeing people comment. I want to talk about this for a second. There's several people that have commented over the course of this video, saying, "Hey, can we talk to Erica? Can we email her? Can we reach out to her? I'd like to talk to her in person."
You should.
Well, hold on. I don't know that that's a good idea, but I'm going to tell you why it's not going to work. Because this woman is not of her right mind. She is not in the there's something missing. There's a screw loose. There's a wire missing. People like her, these narcissists, it is impossible to have a conversation with them. It is impossible to communicate and find resolve with somebody whose entire purpose, entire directive is to maintain control and to garner attention and validation for themselves. They don't see you. Right. They don't see the children. They don't see anything else in the world. It's them. They are self-centered. The world literally in their mind revolves around them. So to communicate with these people, all you're going to get is confusion and frustration. You're going to come at them with logic, compassion, as a normal human being. You're going to say, this is what seems correct. This is what's moral and ethical. And you're going to present this to them and say, hey, look, doesn't this seem like a good resolution? And they're going to come up with a million different excuses, 1,000 different ways to try to send it off in different directions. They're going to mess with your head and mix it all up and make you think that, well, what she's doing is justified. What she's doing, and it's not. We can all see it, and the court sees it too. Don't for a second think that these judges and these attorneys and GALs, excuse me, don't see through this bullshit. They do, and that's why they protect them. It is a perpetuation of conflict. But my point is, it is impossible to actually communicate and have an effective conversation with these people that leads to resolve. It cannot be done. So you reaching out to her, she will use that as fuel. These people thrive on any kind of attention. It doesn't matter whether positive or negative. If you reach out to her and say, Erica, we'd like to really come to a resolve here, and it would be great for the kids, and it'd be great for you, and great for Ted, and it will backfire. It will be flipped around on you, and then she'll take that into court, just like she did with the recent visitation. We had video, lovely. It was an amazing time. We all had a good time. There was beautiful photos of the children, beautiful videos of the children interacting.
It was literally
with Ted.
perfect.
It was fucking perfect.
Right.
And we all knew that the very next day, Erica was going to go in and make a big fucking problem about it, and she did. We were right, because these people are predictable, because they all exhibit the exact same traits and behaviors and patterns.
Perpetuate endless conflict and chaos.
But the reason they do that is because they thrive on the attention. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. They will eat it. They will take anything they can get. So if that woman can walk into court and say that there's a problem with this, and then we spend the whole rest of the day talking about whether it was or it wasn't, doesn't matter to them. They are using that time to feed their own ego and validate themselves.
And
It is impossible.
Erica got called out by the judge on this. So she did it again. So the judge is like, well, we're going to do August 25th and 26th. And Erica stands up and says, Your Honor, those are bad dates for me. You know, I've got this auditing project.
It's disgusting.
I've got this auditing project at work. You know, you have to take into account my interests. You know, and I'm a super mom. I'm taking care of two kids.
If I can't
by
work, we
myself.
can't feed the family. I
Yeah,
don't know how I'm
if
going to
I lose my
my
job.
job.
And to Your Honor, I have lupus. And the judge is like, the judge tells her, Ms. Bush, you're not dying from lupus. So she's and she had said it earlier in this proceeding. Why is Ted getting all this attention? Why is Ted getting all this special treatment?
Because it's not on her.
She said that because she's the focus of attention is no longer on her. It's on me. And she you know is so transparent with no empathy, a sense of entitlement, which is the core narcissistic behavior, and the courts are unwilling to see what's plainly obvious in their face. And the judge is like, the judge is, you know, because I started making arguments in my opening statement. You're going to see evidence that she exhibits traits of narcissistic borderline personality and histrionic personality disorder. And the judge is like, well, Mr. Bush, you're not an expert psychologist. I said, I'm not, but I'm going to point to the evidence. You know, it's funny, the custody evaluators, they can't make diagnoses. So she orders a custody evaluation where you know, these issues aren't even being looked at. And I'm pointing to signals of the obvious of what, you know, here you have seen absolutely no empathy whatsoever. Zero. That's pathological. You know, this attachment disorder, being scared shitless of losing custody to someone who's dying. Okay. I'm going to have to do solutions in another one. You know, I might do another live feed where we would talk, you know, really, because I've been thinking about that and you know, lining them all up. It's going to go, it'd be just too long to do that today. But anyway, so, and then at one point we have this case management conference at the end of the first day. So they try to get me to settle this thing after the first day, in which we were there for about maybe 2.5 hours. And the judge asked Erica questions and I cross-examined her. And then they wanted me to settle without hearing even any of my evidence, where basically I get, you know, a supervised visitation for a little bit, and then we go back and we have a, you know, a normal unrestricted schedule. And I told her, I'm not agreeing to that. I haven't done anything wrong at all. I'm not, you know, why would I agree to that when you haven't even heard any evidence from me? So the guardian ad litem, like, you know, Stage manages this case management conference where they kicked all of the spectators out of the courtroom. And we had this private conversation where the judge is clearly already, you know, predetermined what she's going to do, which is basically cover Judge Carr and Judge Dicklin. You know, she's pretty much telegraphed that. And then she said that again at the end of day 2, where you know, Mr. Bush, I'd like you to do some supervised visits so we can get this process moving. What are you talking about? Okay, you know, the custody evaluation describes 4 in which they were perfect. We just saw the kids again, no problems. Okay, it's in the reports that there's never been a problem. Are you looking for a problem? You know, leave me alone. And I told them explicitly at the end, leave me alone. Stop harassing me. Leave me the hell alone. Let me at peace with my kids and get out of my life. I said it as explicitly as you could when we were leaving. So anyway, so that sort of sums up, you know, sort of what I wanted to talk about.
Well, and so just real quick, so should I talk about Stu?
Stu.
Peters.
No. And then no. And then, by the way, folks, for those of you that follow the David Henderson case, David's coming up to Chicago on Monday and Tuesday, and I look forward to spending some time with him. As you know, David Henderson lost his son Corbin, was barely able to see Corbin while Corbin was dying of cancer. So, I look forward to spending time with David early next week, assuming my health holds up, which I hope it will. Really, really excited and happy to see him. So, anything else? Yeah, solutions. I've been sort of categorizing solutions. Oh, and by the way, the Guardian ad litem actually recommended unsupervised parenting time, and then we go to the hearing, and he's not really saying anything going along with this. But in writing, he said, Erica, Ted should have unsupervised parenting time for my son's birthday, and she objected to that, and she testified and said, Erica, what did you think of that? About that email? Oh, I was shocked and disappointed in Steve Wasco. And the Guardian ad litem in this case literally is useless, worthless, has done nothing, and no one respects his opinion, including her and me.
He looks like a thug.
He looks like Don Corleone.
Yeah, he does.
He's a gangster.
He's a gangster.
He's a straight up huckster, and he should be disciplined. And luckily, there is a paper trail of this. These people have to be held accountable, because these people are scum, and they will forever be scum, no matter whether I'm alive or dead. Someone has to hold these people accountable. And if it's through broader reform, so be it. Anything else? All right, folks. Well, I appreciate you guys tuning in. It's been 2 hours. I think it's time to do some R&R. So I thank everyone for participating. People that have helped me so much recently, I can't thank you enough. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. And I hope everyone hangs in there and thinks about the future. First and foremost is making sure this doesn't happen. If you can prevent this from happening to one person, that's a huge victory.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to demolish this by blunt force on a grand scale. This has to be taken apart, and it can never happen again. There should be congressional investigations.
Mm-hmm.
The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department should be all over this. These are criminal violations that are happening every day, and the violation of state law that needs to be investigated by our state legislatures. There's no oversight, and that's our biggest problem. And so we're going to have to keep shining the light until we finally get in some institutional oversight and cut these people down, to their constitutional limits, which is what they've exceeded. So anyway, take care, folks. Hey, it's Steve. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.